The red carpet blurred into a kaleidoscope of flashing lights and screaming fans as Mila, radiant in a shimmering silver gown, signed yet another autograph. Her smile felt genuine, fueled by the thrill of her latest movie premiere, Chasing Shadows. A gritty crime drama where she played a conflicted detective was already generating Oscar buzz. Tonight was the culmination of years of relentless work, of countless auditions and rejections. It felt like she had finally arrived. But even amidst the euphoria, a subtle unease lingered. The studio head, Victor Sinclair, had gripped her arm a little too tightly backstage, his eyes lingering on her a beat too long. He'd whispered something about her potential and the opportunities he could offer, his words coated with a honeyed sweetness that left a bitter aftertaste. She dismissed it as the awkwardness of powerful men, the kind she'd learned to navigate with a practiced smile and a quick wit. Inside the theater, the premiere was a whirlwind, of forced smiles and calculated air kisses. Agents, producers, and fellow actors all vying for attention. Their conversations a constant hum of ambition and insecurity. Mila found herself seated next to Julian Vance, a legendary actor known for his intense method acting and even more intense reputation. He was charming, attentive, regaling her with stories of old Hollywood, but his gaze felt predatory, like a lion sizing up its prey. Later, at the after-party, the atmosphere thickened with a heady mix of alcohol, ambition, and unspoken desires. Mila found herself cornered by Marcus Thorne, a powerful director known for making or breaking careers. He praised her performance, then subtly suggested she owed him a thank you for championing her for the role. He implied that other actresses had been willing to go further, to offer more, to secure the part. Mila politely excused herself, feeling a knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach as the night wore on. The subtle pressures intensified. A whispered suggestion from an agent about networking with a particularly influential producer, a veiled threat from a rival actress about Mila's limited talent. The constant undercurrent of expectation. A silent understanding that success in Hollywood came at a price. Leaving the party, the flashing lights of the paparazzi seemed harsher, more intrusive. The city lights blurred as her driver navigated the winding roads to her Hollywood Hills home. Exhausted but exhilarated, Mila stepped out of the limousine, the cool night air a welcome relief as she walked toward her front door. She noticed a flicker of movement in the shadows, a fleeting glimpse of a figure disappearing into the darkness. She dismissed it as paranoia, the product of a long and unsettling night. But as she unlocked her door, a prickle of unease ran down her spine. The feeling of being watched, of being a pawn in a game she didn't understand, wouldn't leave her. The glittering facade of Hollywood was beginning to crack, revealing the darkness that lurked beneath. The morning after the premiere, Mila awoke to a pounding headache and a sense of lingering dread. She tried to shake off the unsettling feeling from the night before, chalking it up to exhaustion and the inherent strangeness of Hollywood. She made herself a coffee, glancing at the headlines on her phone. All glowing reviews for Chasing Shadows and effusive praise for her performance. For a brief moment, the darkness receded. Then the news broke. Julian Vance, the legendary actor she had sat next to at the premiere, had been found dead in his mansion. The initial reports were vague, citing a possible overdose. But within hours, the story exploded. Security footage surfaced, grainy and indistinct, appearing to show Mila entering Vance's mansion late the previous night. Witnesses claimed to have seen her arguing with Vance earlier in the evening. And then, the bombshell. The police had discovered a priceless antique dagger belonging to Vance in Mila's car. The dagger was covered in Vance's blood and Mila's fingerprints. The media frenzy was immediate and relentless. Every news outlet, every gossip blog, every social media platform was saturated with the story. Rising Star's downfall, screamed one headline. Hollywood tragedy. Actress accused of murder, blared another. The narrative was already being shaped, the pieces carefully arranged to paint Mila as a cold-blooded killer. The evidence was damning, too neatly arranged. The security footage conveniently blurry, the witnesses suspiciously consistent, the dagger planted with precision. It was a frame-up, elaborate and ruthless. Mila tried to contact her agent, her publicist, anyone who could help her navigate this nightmare. But her calls went unanswered. She was ghosted. abandoned by the very people who had once clamored for her attention. The studio issued a statement, distancing themselves from her, indefinitely postponing the release of Chasing Shadows. Panic set in. She knew she was innocent, but how could she prove it against such overwhelming evidence and a media machine determined to destroy her? The police arrived at her door, their faces grim, their eyes devoid of empathy. They read her rights, the words echoing in her ears like a death knell as they led her away in handcuffs. The paparazzi descended, their cameras flashing like strobe lights, their shouts a cacophony of accusations and condemnation. She was no longer Mila, the rising star. She was Mila, the accused murderer, a pariah in the city that had once embraced her. The news footage of her arrest was broadcast around the world. The manipulated narrative solidified. Mila was guilty, the media had declared it, and the public believed it. She was buried alive, her career, her reputation, her life all seemingly over. The game had begun, and Mila was about to learn just how deadly Hollywood could be. The criminal elite had successfully framed her, and now they were watching, waiting for her to disappear completely. The courtroom was a circus, the air thick with animosity and judgment. Mila, pale and drawn, sat beside her court-appointed lawyer, a man who seemed more interested in damage control than actual defense. The evidence against her was circumstantial but compelling, amplified by the media's relentless campaign to demonize her. Bail was denied. The judge, his face impassive, cited the severity of the crime and the risk of flight. Jail was a brutal awakening. Stripped of her designer clothes and her carefully constructed image, Mila was just another inmate, vulnerable and alone. The other prisoners, fueled by the media's portrayal of her, treated her with contempt and hostility. She was an outsider, a target. During her brief incarceration, the reality of her situation sank in. She was trapped in a system rigged against her, a victim of powerful forces she couldn't comprehend. Her lawyer advised her to plead guilty, to accept a reduced sentence. In exchange for admitting manslaughter, he argued it was the only way to salvage what was left of her life. But Mila refused. She was innocent, and she wouldn't confess to a crime she didn't commit. She knew that pleading guilty would be the final nail in her coffin. A complete surrender to the people who had framed her, with the help of a sympathetic fellow inmate. A former paralegal who believed in her innocence, Mila managed to orchestrate a daring escape. It was risky, desperate, but she saw no other option. She had to clear her name, and she couldn't do it from behind bars. She traded a smuggled phone for information about a blind spot in the security system and a maintenance tunnel that led outside the prison walls. Under the cover of darkness, she slipped through the tunnel, her heart pounding in her chest. She emerged into the cool night air, a fugitive, hunted by the police and the media. She was alone, penniless, and branded a murderer. Her friends and colleagues had abandoned her, fearing association with her scandal. Her phone was dead, her credit cards frozen. She had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. But she had one last hope, a faint glimmer of possibility. Before her arrest, she had received a cryptic message from an anonymous source, warning her about the conspiracy and suggesting she seek out a man named Jason Statham. The message had included a location, a remote cabin in the mountains, far from the glitz and glamour of Hollywood. Now, on the run and desperate, Mila knew she had to find him. He was her only chance, her last hope for redemption. She had to disappear, to shed her old identity and become someone else, someone invisible. She had to navigate the treacherous underworld of Los Angeles, evading capture and piecing together the truth behind the conspiracy that had destroyed her life. The journey would be dangerous, fraught with peril, but Mila was determined to fight back, to reclaim her life and expose the people who had framed her. The hunt was on. The cabin was nestled deep within the San Bernardino Mountains, a rough-hewn structure of logs and stone, almost swallowed by the surrounding wilderness. Smoke curled lazily from the chimney, a silent invitation, or perhaps a warning. Mila, exhausted and disguised in a stolen baseball cap and oversized hoodie, approached cautiously, her heart pounding with a mixture of hope and trepidation. The man who answered her knock was everything she expected and nothing at all. He was tall and weathered, his face etched with lines that spoke of a hard life lived on the edge. His eyes, a piercing blue, held a depth of experience that both intimidated and intrigued her. He was Jason Statham, but he looked nothing like the movie star heartthrob the tabloids often portrayed. This was a man stripped bare, a survivor. He didn't speak, simply regarded her with a cold, assessing gaze. Mila, gathering her courage, blurted out her story, the words tumbling out in a desperate rush. She told him about the frame-up, the media frenzy, the escape, the cryptic message. She pleaded with him to believe her, to help her. Statham listened in silence, his expression unchanging. When she finished, he simply shook his head. "I don't get involved in Hollywood drama," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "Go back where you came from." Mila's hope plummeted. "But the message, they said you could help." "People say a lot of things," Statham replied, turning to close the door. "Please," Mila begged, desperation lacing her voice. "They're going to kill me. I'm innocent. You're my only hope." Statham paused, his hand on the door. He studied her face, searching for something, perhaps a flicker of truth, or perhaps just the desperation of a cornered animal. He saw the fear in her eyes, the exhaustion etched on her face, but he also saw something else, a spark of defiance, a refusal to give up. "I told you, I don't get involved," he repeated, but his voice lacked the same conviction. "This isn't my fight." He was a man who had walked away from his past, a past filled with violence and betrayal. He had sought refuge in the solitude of the mountains, trying to bury the ghosts that haunted him. He had no desire to be dragged back into the world of deceit and danger. But something about Mila's story resonated with him, a faint echo of his own past. He had been betrayed, framed, left for dead. He knew what it was like to be hunted, to be alone, to be innocent and have no one believe you. He sighed, a sound of resignation. "Stay the night," he said finally. "I'll think about it." It wasn't a commitment, but it was a sliver of hope. Mila knew she had to convince him, to show him that she was worth fighting for. She had to awaken the man beneath the hardened exterior, the man who still believed in justice, even if he had tried to bury that belief long ago. The night would be long, and the battle for Jason Statham's help had just begun. The morning sun filtered through the gaps in the cabin walls, casting long shadows across the rough-hewn floor. Mila awoke to the smell of strong coffee and the sound of Statham chopping wood outside. She found him sitting at a rickety table, a map of Los Angeles spread out before him. "I made some calls," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "Checked your story. Most of it lines up with what's been reported." Mila's heart leaped. "So, you believe me?" Statham shook his head. "I believe the official narrative is full of holes. Doesn't mean you're innocent. Just means someone's been working overtime to make you look guilty." "Then why are you helping me?" Mila asked, confused. "I'm not helping you," Statham corrected. "I'm investigating. I need to know the truth. And the only way to find that out is to dig a little deeper." He explained that he had a few contacts, old associates from his previous life, people who still owed him favors. He'd used those connections to access information that wasn't available to the public, details that suggested a carefully orchestrated conspiracy. "The security footage was tampered with," he said, pointing to a spot on the map. "The witnesses were paid off. The dagger. Well, that's just too convenient." "But why?" Mila asked, her voice trembling. "Why would someone do this to me?" "That's what we need to find out," Statham said. "And that's where you come in. You know these people, the players in this game. You can help me navigate the Hollywood maze." Mila hesitated. She was afraid, terrified of returning to the world that had betrayed her. But she knew she had no choice. Statham was her only hope, and she had to trust him, even if she didn't fully understand his motives. "What do you want me to do?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Statham looked at her, his eyes unwavering. "We start with Julian Vance. Who would want him dead? Who benefited from his death? Who had the power to orchestrate this entire charade?" He explained his plan. They would return to Los Angeles under the radar and start asking questions. They would use Mila's knowledge of Hollywood and Statham's skills to uncover the truth. Piece by piece. That IT would be dangerous, risky, but it was the only way to clear her name. "I'm not making any promises," Statham said, his voice hard. "I might find out you're guilty after all. And if I do, I won't hesitate to turn you in." Mila nodded, accepting the terms. She knew it was a gamble, but she was willing to take the risk. She had nothing to lose. As they prepared to leave the cabin, Mila felt a flicker of hope, a spark of determination. She was no longer just a victim, a pawn in someone else's game. She was a fighter, and she was ready to fight for her life, for her freedom, for her truth. With Statham by her side, she had a chance, a slim chance, but a chance nonetheless. The hunt for the truth had begun. Back in Los Angeles, Statham moved with a quiet efficiency, a ghost in the city's neon-lit landscape. That he established a temporary base of operations in a rundown motel on the outskirts of Hollywood, a place where they could remain anonymous and avoid unwanted attention. He instructed Mila to stay put, to keep a low profile while he started digging. His first target was the lead detective on the Vance case, a man named Detective Harding. Statham had learned that Harding had a history of bending the rules, of turning a blind eye in exchange for favors. He suspected that Harding was involved in the frame-up, either willingly or unknowingly. Statham tracked Harding to a dimly lit bar in downtown Los Angeles, a place frequented by cops and criminals alike. He observed him for hours, watching his interactions, listening to his conversations. He noticed Harding meeting with a shadowy figure, a man dressed in an expensive suit, his face obscured by the low lighting. Later that night, Statham followed Harding home, waiting until he was alone before confronting him. He didn't threaten him, didn't use violence. He simply presented him with the evidence he had gathered, the inconsistencies in the Vance case, the tampered security footage, the paid-off witnesses. Harding initially denied everything, but Statham's relentless questioning and his unwavering gaze eventually wore him down. Harding confessed that he had been pressured to close the case quickly, that he had been given specific instructions on how to frame Mila. He refused to reveal who was behind the pressure, claiming he feared for his life. As Statham left Harding's apartment, he knew he was getting closer to the truth, but he also knew that he was walking into a hornet's nest. He was being watched. He could feel it. The next day, while Mila was out buying supplies, Statham was ambushed in their motel room. Two men, heavily armed and clearly professionals, burst through the door, guns blazing. Statham reacted instantly, his training kicking in. He disarmed one of the men with a swift kick. Using him as a shield against the other's gunfire, he engaged in a brutal close-quarters fight using his fists, his feet, and anything he could find as a weapon. He managed to subdue both attackers, but not without sustaining injuries. As he interrogated them, he learned that they had been hired to kill him and Mila, to silence them permanently. They were given a description of Statham and Mila, as well as the location of their motel. They didn't know who had hired them, only that it was someone powerful and connected. The attack confirmed Statham's suspicions. They were dealing with dangerous people, people who were willing to kill to protect their secrets. He knew that he had to be more careful, that he couldn't afford to make any mistakes. He also knew that he couldn't back down. He had come too far, and he was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. The investigation was far from over, and the stakes had just been raised as Statham patched up his wounds. Mila wrestled with the attack, the realization that someone wanted her dead sinking in. She kept replaying the events leading up to Vance's murder, searching for any clue, any detail that could explain why she had been targeted. That night, sleep offered little respite. Instead, she was haunted by fragmented memories, flashbacks that revealed the insidious nature of the conspiracy. Flashback 1. The party. A few weeks before the premiere, Mila attended a private party hosted by Victor Sinclair, the studio head. The atmosphere was opulent, decadent, with a sense of unspoken power hanging in the air. She remembered overhearing a hushed conversation between Sinclair and Vance, their voices laced with anger and veiled threats. She couldn't make out the details, but she sensed a deep animosity between them. Sinclair mentioned something about the deal and Vance refusing to play ball. Flashback 2. The document. A few days later, while visiting Vance on the set of his new movie, Mila accidentally stumbled upon a document on his desk. It was a contract, a complex legal agreement involving offshore accounts and shell corporations. The document was labeled Project Nightingale, and it mentioned the names of several prominent figures in Hollywood, including Sinclair and Marcus Thorne, the director who had pressured her at the premiere. Vance quickly snatched the document. Away, his face flushed with anger. He dismissed it as a private matter, but Mila couldn't shake the feeling that she had seen something she wasn't supposed to. Flashback 3. The warning the anonymous message she received before her arrest suddenly made sense. The message had warned her about a conspiracy involving Vance and several powerful individuals. A conspiracy that threatened to expose the dark underbelly of Hollywood. The message had urged her to stay silent, to disappear, but she had dismissed it as a prank, product of her paranoia. These flashbacks painted a clearer picture of the conspiracy, revealing the reasons why Mila had been targeted. She hadn't been chosen at random. She had stumbled upon something dangerous, something that threatened to expose a web of corruption and illegal activities. Julian Vance had been involved in a shady deal, a deal that involved Victor Sinclair and other powerful figures he had been using Project Nightingale to launder money and evade taxes. Mila had accidentally discovered the evidence, making her a liability. She was either a witness who needed to be silenced, or a convenient scapegoat to take the fall for Vance's murder. As Mila shared her flashbacks with Statham, he listened intently, piecing together the puzzle that he realized that they were dealing with something far bigger than he had initially anticipated. This wasn't just a simple frame-up. It was a carefully orchestrated conspiracy involving powerful individuals who were willing to do anything to protect their secrets. They used you, Statham said, his voice grim. You were a pawn in their game. They needed someone to take the fall for Vance's murder, and you were the perfect candidate. You were a rising star, vulnerable and easily manipulated. Mila felt a surge of anger and betrayal. She had been used, manipulated, and discarded, but she was no longer the naive actress she once was. She was a survivor, and she was determined to fight back. She would use her knowledge of Hollywood, her connections, and her newfound resilience to expose the people who had framed her and bring them to justice. The game had changed, and Mila was ready to play. The failed ambush forced Statham and Mila to move again, abandoning the motel for a series of safe houses, each more temporary and precarious than the last. They were constantly on the move, always looking over their shoulders, never knowing who they could trust. The shared danger, the constant threat of capture or death, forged an unlikely bond between them. Statham, a man of few words, began to open up to Mila, sharing glimpses of his past, the events that had led him to seek refuge in the mountains. He spoke of betrayal, of loyalty, of the price of violence. Mila, in turn, shared her fears, her hopes, her dreams for the future. She showed Statham the vulnerability beneath her Hollywood facade, the resilience that had allowed her to survive in a cutthroat industry. Their uneasy alliance deepened as they worked together, each relying on the other's strengths. Statham's skills in combat and investigation were invaluable, while Mila's knowledge of Hollywood's inner workings proved essential in navigating the treacherous social landscape. They started by targeting Victor Sinclair, the studio head who seemed to be at the center of the conspiracy. Mila used her connections to infiltrate one of Sinclair's exclusive parties, hoping to gather information or find evidence. She managed to overhear a conversation between Sinclair and Marcus Thorne, the director, discussing the Project Nightingale deal and the need to tie up loose ends. She also spotted a familiar face. Detective Harding, looking nervous and out of place as Mila tried to discreetly record the conversation. She was spotted by one of Sinclair's security guards, a hulking brute with a menacing demeanor. She tried to escape, but the guard cornered her in a secluded hallway. Just as he was about to grab her, Statham appeared, seemingly out of nowhere. A brutal fight ensued, with Statham using his skills to quickly incapacitate the guard. They managed to escape the party undetected, but the incident served as a stark reminder of the danger they were in. Later that night, as they patched each other up, Mila and Statham shared a moment of quiet intimacy. They had both risked their lives for each other, and the experience had forged a connection that transcended their initial roles as investigator and client. "Why are you doing this?" Mila asked, her voice soft. "Why are you risking everything for me?" Statham hesitated, searching for the right words. "I told you, I'm just looking for the truth." "But it's more than that, isn't it?" Mila pressed. "You could have walked away. You could have left me to rot in jail." Statham looked at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of pain and determination. "Maybe I saw something in you that I recognized," he said finally. "Maybe I saw a fighter, someone who wouldn't give up, no matter what." In that moment, Mila realized that Statham was more than just a bodyguard or an investigator. He was a kindred spirit, someone who understood her struggle, someone who believed in her, even when she didn't believe in herself. And as they continued their dangerous journey, evading capture and uncovering more evidence, their bond would only grow stronger, forged in the fires of adversity. With the knowledge that Sinclair and Thorne were directly involved in Project Nightingale, Statham decided to target Harding again, hoping to extract more information about the conspiracy's inner workings. They knew Harding was a weak link, someone who could be easily pressured. They tracked Harding to his home, a modest bungalow in a quiet suburban neighborhood. As they approached the house, they noticed something was wrong. The front door was ajar, and the windows were dark. Statham immediately sensed danger. "Stay here," he ordered Mila, drawing his weapon. "Something's not right." He moved cautiously towards the house, his senses on high alert as he stepped inside. He was met with a scene of carnage. Harding was lying on the floor, his body riddled with bullets. Two men, dressed in black tactical gear, were ransacking the house, searching for something. Statham engaged them in a fierce gunfight, using his training and experience to gain the upper hand. He quickly eliminated one of the attackers, but the other managed to escape, disappearing into the night. As Statham checked on Harding, he realized it was too late. The detective was dead. He had been silenced, permanently. Suddenly, sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. Statham knew they had to get out of there, fast. He grabbed Mila and they fled the scene. Just as the first police cars arrived, a high-speed chase ensued, with Statham expertly navigating the narrow streets of Los Angeles, evading the pursuing police cars. He drove with a controlled aggression, using his knowledge of the city to his advantage. They were pursued by not only the police but also by another group of assassins, the same ones who had attacked them at the motel. The assassins were relentless, firing at their car with automatic weapons. Statham weaved through traffic, dodging bullets and ramming pursuing vehicles. Mila, terrified but determined, provided cover fire, using a handgun Statham had given her. The chase led them to a deserted warehouse district, a maze of dark alleys and abandoned buildings. Statham used the environment to his advantage, leading the pursuers into a trap. He drove their car into the warehouse, crashing through a loading dock and sending debris flying. The pursuing cars followed, only to be met with a hail of gunfire. Statham and Mila emerged from the wreckage, taking cover behind overturned crates and abandoned machinery. A fierce firefight erupted, with Statham and Mila fighting back against the combined forces of the police and the assassins. Statham used his tactical skills to outmaneuver his enemies, picking them off one by one. Mila, surprisingly adept with a weapon, held her own, providing valuable support as the battle raged on. Statham realized they were outnumbered and outgunned. They couldn't stay and fight. They had to escape. He created a diversion, setting off a series of explosions that sent the warehouse into chaos. Under the cover of smoke and fire, he and Mila made their escape, disappearing into the darkness. They had barely escaped with their lives, leaving behind a scene of destruction and carnage. But they had survived, and they were one step closer to uncovering the truth. The stakes had never been higher, and the danger was closing in. Escaping the warehouse district by the skin of their teeth, Statham and Mila were battered, bruised, and running out of options. They needed a safe place to regroup, a place where they could analyze the evidence they had gathered and plan their next move. They sought refuge in an abandoned theater in downtown Los Angeles, a relic of Hollywood's golden age, now decaying and forgotten. The theater provided a temporary sanctuary, a place where they could hide from their pursuers and strategize. As they reviewed the evidence, they realized that Victor Sinclair, the studio head, was not the mastermind behind the conspiracy. He was just a pawn, a puppet controlled by someone far more powerful. The key to unlocking the truth lay in uncovering the identity of the puppet master. They focused on Project Nightingale, the money laundering scheme that had triggered the entire chain of events. They knew that the project involved offshore accounts and shell corporations, but they needed to find the link that connected the money to the individuals involved. Mila remembered a conversation she had overheard between Sinclair and Vance, a conversation that mentioned a name: Senator Joseph Caldwell. Caldwell was a powerful politician, a man known for his conservative values and his unwavering support of the entertainment industry. He was also a man with a reputation for ruthlessness and corruption. Statham had done some digging into Caldwell's background, uncovering a series of shady deals and questionable financial transactions. He had also learned that Caldwell had close ties to organized crime, using his political influence to protect their interests as they pieced together the puzzle. They realized that Caldwell was the central figure behind the conspiracy. He was the one who had orchestrated the Project Nightingale scheme, using it to launder money for his criminal associates. He was the one who had pressured Harding to frame Mila, silencing Vance and eliminating any potential threats to his operation. He was the one who had ordered the attacks on Statham and Mila, determined to protect his secrets at all costs. Senator Joseph Caldwell was not just a politician. He was a crime boss, a ruthless manipulator who controlled Hollywood from the shadows. He had used his power and influence to create a web of corruption and deceit, and he was willing to do anything to protect his empire. "He's the one," Statham said, his voice grim. "Caldwell is behind everything." Mila felt a surge of anger and determination. She had been a pawn in Caldwell's game, a victim of his ruthless ambition. But she was no longer afraid. She knew what she had to do. She had to expose Caldwell, to reveal his true nature to the world, and to bring him to justice for his crimes. But exposing Caldwell would be a dangerous undertaking. He was a powerful man, with allies in high places. He had the resources to silence them permanently. They needed a plan, a way to expose Caldwell without putting themselves in further danger. As they sat in the abandoned theater, surrounded by the ghosts of Hollywood's past, Statham and Mila knew that they were facing their greatest challenge yet. They were up against a formidable enemy, a man who controlled the levers of power. But they were not alone. They had each other, and they had the truth on their side, and they were determined to fight, to expose the darkness that lurked beneath the glittering facade of Hollywood, and to bring Senator Joseph Caldwell to justice. Knowing that Caldwell held all the cards, Statham and Mila realized they needed irrefutable evidence, something that could withstand his influence and expose him to the world. They decided to focus on obtaining the Project Nightingale documents, the contracts and financial records that proved Caldwell's involvement in the money laundering scheme. Mila remembered Vance mentioning that he had kept a copy of the documents in a safe deposit box at a bank in Beverly Hills. Getting to that box would be incredibly risky, but it was their only shot. Statham devised a plan to infiltrate the bank using his skills in stealth and deception. Mila, disguised as a bank employee, would gain access to the safe deposit vault, while Statham would provide cover and security. The operation was fraught with danger. The bank was heavily guarded, and Caldwell's men were likely watching for any sign of activity. They had to be careful, precise, and above all lucky. They managed to breach the bank security system, navigating the maze of corridors and surveillance cameras. Mila reached the safe deposit vault, her heart pounding in her chest. She located Vance's box and quickly retrieved the documents as they were leaving the bank. They were ambushed by Caldwell's men. A fierce firefight erupted, with Statham using his skills to protect Mila and fend off the attackers. They managed to escape the bank, but not without sustaining injuries. With the Project Nightingale documents in their possession, they had the irrefutable evidence they needed to expose Caldwell. But they were running out of time. Caldwell's men were closing in, their resources and manpower seemingly limitless. They were being hunted, cornered, and their options were dwindling. They tried to contact the media, hoping to leak the documents and expose Caldwell to the world. But every news outlet they reached out to refused to publish the story, fearing Caldwell's influence and the potential repercussions. They were being silenced, their voices stifled. Desperate, they turned to an old friend of Mila's, a journalist named Sarah, who had a reputation for integrity and courage. Sarah agreed to help them, promising to publish the story, no matter the cost. But as Sarah prepared to go public with the evidence, she was threatened by Caldwell's men. They warned her to stay silent, to bury the story, or face the consequences. Sarah refused to be intimidated, vowing to expose Caldwell, even if it meant risking her life. As Sarah prepared to publish the story, Statham and Mila knew that time was running out. Caldwell's men were closing in, determined to silence them and protect their secrets. They had to act fast, to expose Caldwell before it was too late. The final confrontation was looming, and the fate of Mila, Statham, and the truth hung in the balance. The criminal elite were tightening their grip, and the clock was ticking. Knowing they were cornered and that Sarah was in danger, Statham devised a daring plan to expose Caldwell to the world, a plan that would force the senator to reveal his true nature in front of a live audience. He decided to use Caldwell's own fundraising gala against him. Caldwell was hosting a lavish gala at a prestigious hotel in downtown Los Angeles, a gathering of the city's elite, a perfect stage for his carefully constructed image of power and respectability. Statham planned to crash the gala, to confront Caldwell, and to expose his crimes to the world. He knew it was a suicide mission. The hotel would be heavily guarded, and Caldwell's men would be on high alert. But it was their only chance. They had to take the fight to Caldwell, to force him to face the consequences of his actions. Statham and Mila prepared for the final confrontation, gathering their weapons and formulating their strategy. They knew they were facing overwhelming odds, but they were determined to fight, to expose the truth and to clear Mila's name. On the night of the gala, Statham and Mila infiltrated the hotel, blending in with the crowd of wealthy attendees. They moved with stealth and precision, avoiding detection and making their way towards the main ballroom, where Caldwell was scheduled to give a speech. As Caldwell took the stage, Statham and Mila made their move. Statham created a diversion, setting off a series of small explosions that caused chaos and confusion. While the security guards were distracted, Mila took the stage, grabbing the microphone and addressing the crowd. "My name is Mila," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. "I'm the actress who was framed for the murder of Julian Vance. And I'm here to tell you the truth." She proceeded to expose Caldwell's crimes, detailing his involvement in Project Nightingale, his manipulation of the media, and his attempts to silence her and anyone who threatened to expose him. She presented the Project Nightingale documents as evidence, displaying them on a large screen for everyone to see. Caldwell's men reacted swiftly, attempting to silence Mila and regain control of the situation. A fierce firefight erupted in the ballroom, with Statham using his skills to protect Mila and fend off the attackers. The ballroom descended into chaos, with guests screaming and running for cover. Statham and Mila fought their way towards Caldwell, determined to confront him face to face. The final showdown took place on the stage, with Statham facing off against Caldwell and his remaining bodyguards. A brutal fight ensued, with Statham using his skills in close-quarters combat to gain the upper hand. As Statham battled Caldwell's bodyguards, Mila confronted the senator, demanding that he confess his crimes. Caldwell, cornered and desperate, refused to admit anything, vowing to silence her permanently. In a climactic moment, Statham disarmed Caldwell, pointing a gun at his head. He gave him one last chance to confess, to admit his guilt and to clear Mila's name. Caldwell, his face contorted with rage and fear, finally broke down, admitting his crimes in front of the entire audience. He confessed to orchestrating the Project Nightingale scheme, to framing Mila, and to ordering the attacks on anyone who threatened to expose him. The truth was finally out, exposed to the world. Caldwell's confession, broadcast live across social media by attendees using their phones, was a watershed moment. The carefully constructed facade of respectability crumbled, revealing the ruthless criminal beneath. But the battle wasn't over. Mila knew that Caldwell's confession alone wouldn't be enough to bring down the entire network of corruption that he had built. She needed to use her own skills and knowledge of Hollywood to turn the tables on her enemies, to expose their crimes to the media and the public. She started by contacting Sarah, the journalist who had risked her life to help them. Together, they released the Project Nightingale documents to every major news outlet, bypassing the censorship that Caldwell had imposed. The documents provided irrefutable evidence of Caldwell's involvement in money laundering, bribery, and other criminal activities. Mila then used her connections in Hollywood to rally support, reaching out to actors, directors, and producers who had been victims of Caldwell's manipulation and control. She organized a press conference, where these individuals shared their stories, exposing the senator's abuse of power and his exploitation of the entertainment industry. The media frenzy was immediate and overwhelming. Every news outlet, every gossip blog, every social media platform was saturated with the story. Caldwell's crimes were splashed across the headlines, and the public outrage was palpable. Mila used her platform to speak out against the corruption and exploitation that had become rampant in Hollywood. She called for reform, for accountability, and for a new era of transparency and integrity. She inspired others to come forward, to share their stories, and to demand change. She also turned her attention to Victor Sinclair and Marcus Thorne, the studio executive and the director who had played key roles in The Conspiracy. She knew that they were just pawns in Caldwell's game, but they were still responsible for their actions. She confronted Sinclair and Thorne, presenting them with evidence of their involvement in Project Nightingale and threatening to expose them to the authorities if they didn't cooperate. Faced with the prospect of jail time and public humiliation, Sinclair and Thorne agreed to testify against Caldwell, providing valuable information about his criminal activities. Mila also used her knowledge of Hollywood's image-making machine to craft a compelling narrative, one that would resonate with the public and expose the truth about Caldwell. She produced a documentary, Hollywood's Dark Secret, which detailed the senator's crimes and his manipulation of the entertainment industry. The documentary was a massive success, reaching millions of viewers and further fueling the public outrage. Thanks to Mila's efforts, the tide had turned. Caldwell, once a powerful and untouchable figure, was now a pariah, shunned by his colleagues and facing the prospect of imprisonment. The media, once complicit in his cover-up, was now clamoring to expose his crimes. The public, once deceived by his carefully constructed image, was now demanding justice. Mila had used her own skills and knowledge of Hollywood to turn the tables on her enemies, to expose their crimes to the media and the public. She had taken control of the narrative, crafting a story that would resonate with the world and bring down the entire network of corruption that Caldwell had built. The battle was far from over, but Mila had won a major victory, a victory that would pave the way for justice and reform. The aftermath of Caldwell's confession was a whirlwind. The FBI launched a full-scale investigation, arresting Caldwell, Sinclair, Thorne, and numerous other individuals involved in Project Nightingale and the conspiracy to frame Mila. The Project Nightingale documents, along with the testimonies of Sinclair and Thorne, provided overwhelming evidence of their guilt. Caldwell and his associates were charged with a range of crimes, including money laundering, bribery, conspiracy, and obstruction of justice. They faced lengthy prison sentences and the complete destruction of their careers and reputations. Mila, exonerated and vindicated, was finally able to clear her name. The charges against her were dropped, and the media, once so quick to condemn her, now showered her with praise and apologies. She was hailed as a hero, a symbol of courage and resilience in the face of corruption. But the experience had changed her forever. She was no longer the naive and trusting actress she once was. She had seen the dark side of Hollywood, the corruption and exploitation that lurked beneath the glittering facade. She had been betrayed, framed, and left for dead. But she had also found the strength to fight back, to expose the truth, and to reclaim her life. As she began to rebuild her life, Mila was determined to use her platform to advocate for change, to fight against the corruption and exploitation that had almost destroyed her. She established a foundation to support victims of injustice, providing legal assistance and counseling to those who had been wrongly accused or exploited. She also returned to acting, choosing roles that reflected her newfound sense of purpose and her commitment to social justice. She starred in a movie about a whistleblower who exposes corporate corruption, a role that resonated deeply with her own experiences. Her career soared to new heights, but she never forgot the lessons she had learned. She remained grounded, humble, and committed to using her platform to make a difference in the world. She also reconnected with her old friends and colleagues, rebuilding the relationships that had been shattered by the scandal. She forgave those who had abandoned her, understanding that they had acted out of fear and self-preservation. Mila's journey had been long and arduous, filled with danger, betrayal, and loss. But she had emerged from the darkness stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. She had faced her demons and emerged victorious. Justice had been served, the conspiracy had been exposed, and Mila's name had been cleared. She was finally free to rebuild her life, to pursue her dreams, and to make a positive impact on the world. The scars of the past would always remain, but they served as a reminder of her strength, her resilience, and her unwavering commitment to the truth. She was no longer just a rising star. She was a survivor, a fighter, and a beacon of hope for others who had been wronged. As the dust settled and the cameras faded, Statham, true to his nature, began to withdraw. He wasn't comfortable with the attention, the accolades, the hero worship. He was a man of the shadows, protector, not a celebrity. He watched Mila from afar, admiring her strength, her resilience, her newfound sense of purpose. He knew that she was capable of anything, that she had the power to make a real difference in the world. His job was done. He had helped her find her way, and now it was time for him to disappear, to return to the solitude that he craved. One evening, as Mila was preparing to attend an awards ceremony, Statham approached her. His eyes filled with a mixture of pride and regret. "I'm leaving," he said, his voice low. "I'm going back to the mountains." Mila was taken aback. She had grown to rely on Statham, to trust him, to care for him. He had been her protector, her confidant, her friend. She couldn't imagine her life without him. "But why?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Why are you leaving now?" Statham hesitated, searching for the right words. "I'm not meant for this world," he said finally. "I'm a shadow, a ghost. I belong in the darkness." He explained that he had found peace in the mountains, a refuge from the violence and betrayal that had haunted him for so long. He couldn't stay in Hollywood, surrounded by the glitz and glamour, the corruption and deceit. He needed to return to his solitude, to his quiet life. Mila understood, but she couldn't help feeling a sense of loss. She knew that Statham was doing what he needed to do, but she would miss him terribly. "Thank you," she said, her eyes filled with tears. "Thank you for everything. You saved my life." Statham smiled, a rare and genuine smile. "You saved yourself," he said. "I just showed you the way." He turned to leave, disappearing into the shadows. Mila watched him go, a pang of sadness in her heart. She knew that she would never forget him, that he would always be a part of her life. As she stepped onto the red carpet,